Looks like we're live now.
Hey there.
Hi, everybody.
Oh, there we go.
Hi, Dr. Nick, or Dr. Ben in this case.
Yep.
Ben, what's up? Kelsey, what's up?
Well, I have some pepperoni rolls and a glass of water to keep myself fed and hydrated during this podcast here.
It's like lambus bread. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
It's like lambus bread that the hobbits took on their quest to throw the ring into the fires of Mount Doom.
Yes.
It's true.
Oh, there's Jessica. Hi, Jessica. Glad you could join us today.
Jessica, yay!
Yay! We're happy to
Hi,
have you.
Jessica. I'm going to blast this out to...
Oh, I'm going to blast this out on my Discord.
I was actually prepared and went ahead and scheduled my stuff already. So.
Oh, yay! I mean, I scheduled my stuff ahead of time, too.
You guys.
Yeah, I know, right? It's like we're prepared. Oh, my God. Can I just say before the panel starts properly that, like, things like Asana and Trello are saving my life right now. Because, like, the whole, like, for folks who have no idea what I'm talking about, Trello and Asana basically operate like a board system according to the Kanban method, where it's a series of columns and you have cards in each column and you move the card down as you work on things in the chain of progression. So for example, on my own personal board, when it comes to making comic stuff, I have a column for actively being scripted, actively being edited, pages in progress, pages completed.
Right.
And just moving things down the chain as I get done. And each card in the column is like a thing, like a page of The Legend of Jamie Roberts. And it moves down the chain as I work on it. Mm. It is saving my life right now.
Yeah, I probably need to start doing something like that.
Yeah. Oh, Ben, you got a hello from Anna from CCS.
Anna, you made it. Yay!
Huzzah!
Yeah, that's Anna Selheim. She does a lot of comics, especially on mental health and on social issues. Definitely worth checking out. She's great. I really like her writing. She recently did an article on the dangers of some of the self-help Instagram comics that are going up.
Self-help Instagram comics? What are those?
Well,
that's the thing.
It's comics that are talking about... oh, my phone's unmuted. Let me fix that.
Oh, fix that.
Talking about social issues and things like that. Especially like social anxiety, mental health stuff. And she talks about how if it's not handled right, that can actually be very harmful and detrimental. So interesting stuff. We're checking out. And she has a Patreon. Have I plugged you enough, Anna?
Anna, plug yourself. Put your link to your Patreon page in the chat.
That might not work. I found before that putting links in the chat sometimes gets blocked by YouTube. But give it a shot.
That's
should I turn my volume up or is it okay?
Oh, you're good. We can hear you.
Yeah, the microphone's like a little ways away. As long as, do I need to turn it up or is it okay? You're good?
You're fine.
We can hear you. Chat, let us know if you can hear CB.
I feel really relaxed here. I've got my bicycle on the wall and my couch. You know, it's all about relaxation at the moment.
Yep.
You're such a hipster.
My coffee
cup on your wall.
I know. It's there for, I'm renting this place for a while. It's there for decoration. You can't actually use it. So it's just tempting me. Mm-hmm. I'm going to have to buy my own bike and ride around downtown Albuquerque.
Oh, man, I need to get my own bike. Now that I've moved up to the Toledo area and I can actually ride a bike around without having to go uphill both ways.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. Because in my previous town, it was all in the Appalachian foothills. So it was just up and down both ways, no matter which way you went. So glad to be up here.
Yeah, I remember seeing the area that you used to live in. I can see the hills being an issue. So.
Oh, such a pain. But anyway, thank you for joining us, everybody. Today we're going to be talking about the future of Comicons, what they might look like. This is all hypothetical stuff. But this is also stuff that we might be talking about that's within the realm of possibility, considering everything going on right now, but also based on our own past experience, because all of us have been either attendees or vendors at Comic-Cons for many, many years. Like, if the both of you could give some background of your own convention experience, what qualifies you to talk about this subject? We'll start with you.
Oh, you'll start with me? Okay.
Pressure's on you.
I feel the pressure every day, especially when it comes to comics. Comics is so high pressure. And so anyway, so I started probably like late 90s going to conventions as a fan. And I was doing research for potentially getting into comic books professionally. So, like from like 1996 to 2000, I was in the Chicago area. So I went to the Chicago Comic-Con, as it was called back then. And during that time, Wizard bought it and became the Wizard World Chicago. And at that time, the Chicago show was neck and neck with San Diego in terms of attendance. It was only 40,000 people or something at each one. I mean, it was like a very small, like, fraction of what you see now. This is like when conventions were starting to really start to get busy and people were interested in them. And before that, I've been collecting comics since the actually, my first comic I bought in 1979.
What?
It was a Batman 100. It was a Batman 40th anniversary issue. And then he just had his 80th anniversary recently. So it was this Batman Digest 100-page little thing that I got from the PX base at the military base. I was growing up as a kid. So anyway, but in the 80s, I would go to like these like one-day comic book conventions at like a hotel.
So back when they only lasted one day.
Yeah. So I guess I've been going to conventions since the 80s. Oh my gosh. I'm not telling the story very well. Let's go mid-80s, going to conventions, one-day shows. I took a break in the early 90s from comics. I don't think I bought a comic like 4 years in the early 90s. Then I came back in the mid-90s, started going to the bigger conventions that were suddenly becoming 2-3 day shows. And then in the 2000s, that's when my brothers and I, we launched our own little small press company. And we started going to conventions all over. And for the next 10 years, from 2000 to 2010, I think I did at least 20 cons a year. And that includes like back when Emerald City was only having 1,000 people go to it. I was at the first few Emerald City Comic-Cons. Yeah. I was at the first few Phoenix Comic-Cons when they only had like 5,000 people, and that was in Mesa, not at the big convention center.
Back when they were also called Phoenix Comic-Con, they have changed their name like 7 times now.
7 times. Those guys are awesome, though. They're one of my favorite crews. But then, like, over the course of the 2000s, this whole thing just started to just explode. And by the time I left, I moved to Los Angeles in 2005 and worked for some companies there and helped them with conventions too. And by the time I left in 2010, I mean, these shows were just massive. So since then, it's been a few appearances here and there. I've done some shows with Kelci. We did Phoenix Comic-Con or Fan Expo, or whatever it's called.
Yeah, that was my first big convention, if not my first Comic-Con proper.
Yeah. That was a lot of fun. And then we met a lot of cool people there. And then
but Andy Warpigs, I got to give a shout out to Andy Warpigs. He's not a comic artist, but he's a punk rocker, and he makes great folk punk songs.
Nice.
He actually got a feature in the Phoenix newspapers recently, which is awesome.
Oh, sweet. That is awesome. We'll have to throw his link up there at some point, take a look at his music.
Yeah.
But then I did San Diego Comic-Con in 2015. I've done some shows here in New Mexico, done a few like in-store creator events, but I don't think I've done an event since 2016. I haven't. That was it for me. I haven't done anything since 2016. So you're caught up from 1979 to 2016. Where are we going from here?
Oh man, we're gonna go right to Ben and his background in comics and comic conventions. What is your background with them, sir?
Well, I first started going to cons in 2008 with Otakon. I was an attendee and started out as a cosplayer. doing a lot of stuff. And that's how I got involved in the con community, doing a couple a year. And then in 2014, when I decided I really wanted to be doing comics professionally, I went to the Center for Cartoon Studies and got my Master's in Fine Arts. Not pictured behind me. These are all my mom's degrees because I'm using her office while quarantined.
Yeah.
But yeah, and starting in about 2015, like in my I think at the end of my first year at CCS, I started doing small cons and things like that. And over the last couple of years, I've done at least a dozen cons a year, largely small indie cons and anime conventions, which honestly are my favorites to do. And I also do a running web comic called Cospain, which is specifically about con life and the cosplay life.
What a great title, Cospain. I love it.
Yeah. You know what's funny? Like when I was researching that name to make sure I could do it, which, by the way, I recommend doing because you don't want to just take somebody else's name. There wasn't a comic, but Cospain is a last name. It's a French last name.
Oh, wow.
So I think one of the characters that has to be their last name, and it just hasn't come up yet. But yeah, I've done a lot of tabling with Kelci. We actually met 2018, I think.
Wait, hold on. When was the year of Put and Play?
I want to say that was 2018.
I remember Put and Play, hearing it from you, Kelci.
Yeah, I believe I moved to Columbus in 2017, and we met during the spring cons the next year because we basically were at a bunch of the same cons.
Yeah, like where it was absurd, and we were like, "Are you following me? Are you following me? Is this what's going on?"
Yeah, it was really funny because we were talking. We then started comparing notes about what cons we were going to, and we were both going to a con called Put and Play, which is. It has a special place in my heart as one of the greatest train wreck cons I will ever go to. Like I really, if they did it again, I'd go back.
Oh, same. Like that holds a special place in my heart for best worst convention I have ever been to.
Yeah, it was great in its own dysfunctional way.
Yeah.
But,
what exactly was Put and Play for people out there who might not know?
I don't think we want to spend I don't even want to spend half an hour talking about it. That's the one problem.
Yeah, we could easily spend a half an hour talking about it. I actually did a video all about Put and Play. You can watch that on my YouTube channel, which is the channel that this is streaming on.
Awesome.
Yeah, so I would watch that after the live stream.
Yeah. I'll just the shortest bit of it. It was a first time con. It was happening on a resort island in the middle of Lake Erie, which. And was just very weird. Like you had to take a ferry to get there, and you had to pay the ferry fee for round trip travel, and then they also were charging a fee at the door. Yeah. So the turnout was really not great. Yeah. They had rival business owners on the island actually created a fake Facebook group that called themselves Put and Play Official Facebook Group, and then said the event was canceled. Like there was all kinds of nuts stuff that happened.
Oh, there's so much drama around like the back end of this convention, and that's why there wasn't a whole lot of turnout. But yeah, we don't want to turn this into a half-hour divergent chat about Put and Play. We're talking about conventions and
the future too. So
Kelci, we need your pedigree.
My pedigree is not super duper long. My first ever convention was maybe 2007. I went to a anime convention in Columbus called Anime Punch in lieu of going to a junior prom because I was that kind of nerd. I didn't go to either of the proms. I just went to conventions. That's how I did it. First year was Anime Punch. The next year was Colossal Con. So yeah, Colossal Con has a unique place in my heart, knowing what I know about Colossal Con now. Yeah. But no, my first convention experiences were as an attendee at anime conventions, and I didn't sell at them properly until I had my first attempt at selling at Animarathon, which was an anime convention at my alma mater, Bowling Green State University. One day affair. Yeah. Woo! My roommate and I, that's how we met. We met at college. She and I lived on the same floor. But Yeah, anime conventions was my first exposure to conventions, and I didn't really attend a Comic-Con proper until, I would argue, Space, because I got some free tickets to Space back in like 2011, 2012, when I first joined Twitter, and they were like, retweet this and we'll give you free tickets. And I'm like, I don't know if this is legit, but I'll do it. And I retweeted, and they were like, here's your free tickets. And I'm like, wait, this is real? So that was how I attended Space. And then after Space, I went to Phoenix Comic-Con. And then after that, as a vendor, I started averaging like 5 to 6 conventions, and then it jumped up to 10, then it jumped up to 14. I was funny story, I was actually going to cut back on the number of conventions I was going to attend this year, and then stuff happened. So I was like, this is obviously supposed to happen. So, but yeah, I think the most conventions or appearances, etc., that I've ever done in 1 year was 14.
I should do an official count at some point.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny because when I was trying to do my taxes this year, I needed to remember all the cons I had. I just ended up going through social media just to see all the places, just to make sure I didn't miss one.
Yeah.
Because there were some cons that I did so last minute, mainly because of you, because you're like, you want to split a table? I'm like, yeah, I'm free this weekend.
Oh yeah, there was a lot of that with me.
Yeah. But getting into the main question, what's going to happen to all these cons now? And how all this is going to work.
Let's address the elephant in the room and say, yes, we are aware that San Diego Comic-Con is happening online right now as we speak. I think it properly started on Wednesday and has been going through this weekend. Yeah.
Is it free to watch?
Yes.
A lot of the panels are, yeah.
Okay.
Which I would hope that they would be, considering that officially San Diego Comic-Con is a nonprofit, but...
That's actually an interesting point. One thing a lot of people don't realize if they're not in the industry is that pretty much all cons are nonprofit. They generally are not making their money back. The really big ones often do. Like the huge ones actually can make money, but the little ones you may go to just in your local library and things like that, those are generally at best breaking even. Again, they're doing that by keeping their costs really low.
Yeah, I actually studied how Comic-Cons work as part of a project when I was in college, because my minor in my Bachelor of Arts, my minor is in arts management, which is a nicer way of saying business for artists. Right. And I took 2 classes that were looking at some business sides of art. So you could either study art galleries or art festivals or art museums as part of your, not necessarily senior project, because I took this sophomore year, but I studied comic conventions, particularly San Diego Comic-Con, to see how they structured themselves, how they made money doing stuff, and all that stuff. And it's largely sponsorships. Yeah. Like there's a reason why the Comic-Con pamphlets that they hand out to attendees that list like the panels that you can go to, the artists and the artist alleys and all that stuff. There's a reason why there are pages upon pages of like sponsored by and business logos of local businesses. Right. Because that's how they make up costs for like printing out those books in the first place, printing out badges, renting out the space. And that's a whole other ordeal, is finding a space to run these conventions, which brings me to the one big thing that I think the future of Comic-Cons is going to embrace is shifting away from physical spaces and going more towards the online ones. But that has its own issues. Yeah, I'm kind of 2 minds with that, because for one, I do think digital cons are going to continue being a thing after this whole mess is over. Like, I actually think they've started to prove that they have some legs, but I do think that a lot of cons are still going to want to be physical spaces because everybody's missing that right now. Well, everybody's missing that, and also not everybody has an internet connection.
Yeah. But one of the big things with that also is a lot of cons, I bet, are going to be pretty upset with the convention centers because a lot of them got burned by the whole disaster insurance stuff that happened. I really wonder what they're going to do about that. For those of you who don't know, with a lot of these cons, they were slow to refund people and they were slow to officially cancel the con. Not because they didn't want to, because the writing was on the wall for months, but because they had event insurance, and the event insurance would not pay back, it would not pay out at all if they did not, until it was forced to cancel by government notice, which took a long time to happen. And as a result, a lot of these cons were looking at thousands and thousands of dollars that they were stuck in limbo on and couldn't pay back. So I kind of wonder if there's going to be some major changes there.
I would imagine so. If they're booking at fewer venues, then the liability insurance and the disaster insurance wouldn't necessarily be necessary.
Right. The other big thing with a lot of that, though, is I cannot see. I've actually been having debates with my dad on this because he thinks that this is the type of event that could just make this industry go away. I really don't think it will. The example he uses is horse-drawn buggies getting replaced by the car. And it's like you had an entire industry based around making buggy whips and making, raising horses and things like that. And all of a sudden, it's pretty much decimated by the invention of the automobile. And the big thing is
made into like a leisure thing.
The same thing for coin collectors from payphones. Stuff like that,
Yeah, but the other thing is that none of this stuff disappears overnight, and both of those were replaced by something that was a superior product, and that hasn't happened yet. I'm of the position that cons are not dead. Just want to make that clear, like in-person cons. I just think that it's going to be a couple years before they really recover.
Yeah. CB, what are your thoughts? Or are your thoughts still percolating?
I definitely think they're going to recover. I mean, they're going to be a little bit different, as Ben is saying. They're going to have to adapt and evolve with this. They've adapted and evolved since I left them, full time in 2010. Back in the 2000s, it was more about comic book creators were there setting up and doing panels. The movies were happening, but they weren't as big of a deal. It was more about the comics. And I remember back in early 2000s, you would only see a couple of people in costume walking around a convention. I mean, really, there was very few people, and usually it was the same people. It was like the same guy in a Captain America costume, and the same guy in this Batman costume with the rubber hood, and he was just sweating down his face. And they were all. It was the same couple that dressed up as Superman and Lois Lane. I mean, it was like, and you knew them by name. They would come by your table, and they would never buy anything. But you say hello and stuff, but it was like in the early 2000s is when it shifted to cosplay, movie stuff, TV, and it's just exploded since then. So for me, as a comic book creator, it's great that people are out there dressing up in costumes, and we've had people dress up in costume for some of our characters, Kelci.
Yeah, which is awesome.
It was pretty cool.
I want that to happen so badly. I do have a friend who's talked about cosplaying one of the characters from Cospain, and I have no idea.
I hope that they do.
Yeah, we haven't quite figured out how that would work because technically the costumes keep changing anyway. But
it's kind of meta too to cosplay a costume from a cosplay comic. It's like, whoa.
Yeah, it's gonna be great.
So it's shifted, and the attendance levels have gone through the roof to where there's actually like a lottery system for shows like San Diego to even get into these shows to see these panels.
Yeah.
So
and also, if I can add, for things like Small Press Expo, it's become a lottery system for artists to even send in their table applications and exhibit at the venue.
That's the same thing with New York Comic-Con, San Diego Comic-Con. Yeah, it's like there's a waiting list or something. So there's a big demand to attend these things, to set up at these things. But for a writer or an artist who's doing comics like we are, what is the point of going to them when you can reach people online and put your comic book out there and do a Kickstarter or an Indiegogo or something and ship the books to them, sign them. What is the point of creators like us going to these things? The question is that time, taking a step back now that the conventions are on pause. They're definitely coming back. I agree with Ben about that. They're going to come back, and they might be even bigger than ever.
Yeah. So then here's a question that I just thought of as we were talking about this. So what do you both think would be the draw that conventions would do to get people to even come into the door moving forward?
Well, I do think they're going to have to make some serious hygiene changes, at least at the beginning. Because even when, let's say a vaccine for COVID came out tomorrow, I still think it would take at least a year for cons to properly recover, because there are a lot of people who are still going to be gun shy. There's still going to be a lot of people who are quarantined, people who don't get the vaccine right away because they want to make sure there are no side effects and things like that. Not anti-vaxxing, I'm saying just being, making sure that the first batch isn't tainted or anything like that.
Yeah.
So I think one thing I'd like to see cons do is very deliberately find ways to limit attendance early on. Like, they're going to want to be at least half the size that they were before. And that includes, I think they should, like, I'm not just saying this to punish attendees. I think the artist alley is going to have to be half the size too, so they can space out tables. Yeah.
Though the question then becomes, how are they going to enforce the 6-foot social distancing in those venues? Because these are all volunteer run. Keep that in mind. Because
I have forgive me. I have a thought on that, Kelsey.
Go for it.
Directly on that. I've been watching The Daily Woo, who's a pretty cool channel on YouTube. Adam the Woo is what he calls himself. He is very energetic. It's a really cool channel. He goes all across the country, but he's a huge fan of amusement parks. He's a huge fan in particular of Disney.
Okay.
And he's been at Disney World in Florida, in Orlando, this entire month doing videos and showing people what it's like. And the sanitizer stations, the temperature checks before you come through there, how they put people in the queues to go on these rides. So I think for all of us to take a look at his videos, because it's definitely he's a man on the street, on the ground, showing us exactly what's happening and describing all these procedures. And people are there, like how people park in the parking lot. There's a space between each car, how you go through the security system, the marks on the ground, the 6 feet spacers. And these are people riding amusement park rides, these are people walking around in the heat with masks on, and they're stopping to get some food, and you have to stay and sit to eat. You can't walk and eat. So these are the kind of things that I think could be applied to a convention, setup.
Yeah. Well, one other thing that makes that tricky is much of Disney World, and forgive me if I'm incorrect about this, I haven't been to Disney World since I was in I might have been in middle school. Like, it was a long time ago. But Disney World's largely outdoors, right?
Yeah.
That's a good point.
That makes a huge difference because the majority of cons are indoors.
Well, they are riding Space Mountain, and there are indoor attractions like the Rise of Skywalker.
Are they doing things like spacing people out on the roller coasters? Is that a thing?
They are doing that. Yeah, they space it out. They're spacing out people like in the auditoriums to watch the thing on the screen or something. But they're getting rid of like a lot of the live interactions that they have. If you were going to the Haunted Mansion, there's typically somebody there who talks to you before you go in there. I mean, they're cutting things out here and there to ensure that there's the social distancing and the aspect of, and to keep people moving too.
Yeah. So that'll be interesting how the cosplay community is affected then, if these kinds of measures are brought to comic conventions in the future. Like, how are cosplayers going to navigate around these?
My hope is that there are going to be a lot of people who come up with masks for their characters. And the thing is, that's not that crazy to do. Like, so much of the cosplay community, outside of specifically the Comicons. By the way, another thing for people, there are different classifications for every single different kind of con. There's Comic-Cons, Anime Cons, Zine Fests, Comic Expos. Like, these are all technically different.
Yeah.
But Comic-Cons in particular tend to have more American properties, but the cosplay community really started getting big in anime cons in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And for a lot of those are based on Japanese properties where masks when you're sick are perfectly normal. Like, they've been a thing forever. So just at the most basic level, I could see just a basic mask being there. And most cosplayers will make masks that fit their characters.
Yeah. And this was something that my sister joked about in one live stream once, where she was like, you know what? The industrial goth community had a leg up on everybody else because masks are just part of their ensemble.
Yeah. I like cosplaying. I have two categories for characters that I cosplay these days whenever I get the chance. Characters who already have beards and characters who wear masks. And actually, you'd be surprised how small a list that is, just because, I don't know, the Japanese really don't like bearded characters. And none of the bearded characters have mustaches. It's weird. But it's the mask thing I really expect to become big. I'm probably going to remake my Plague Doctor costume for Zero from Zero Time Dilemma, which is funny on multiple levels.
Yeah. I want to take a second to highlight Jessica's comment here. Frustratingly, those changes would make it so much easier for me to go to a con, but I can't go out anywhere since I have asthma and can't risk it. Using a wheelchair at a con is a pain. So that's something that I think a lot more conventions are going to need to navigate is disability access, particularly wheelchairs. I know that there are some zine fests that already have questionnaires for the artists who are applying, being like, do you need wheelchair access? Do you need this? These sorts of questions. I think moving forward, if comic conventions are going to continue, you're going to see a lot more questions like those on not only vendor applications, but also people who are trying to book a ticket just as an attendee.
I just had an idea I want to throw out there. It just occurred to me, so this could be stupid. But there's a thing that started to happen at a lot of grocery stores and things like that, where they have, I can't remember what they're called, but they basically will have 1 hour during the day. Sorry about that. That are lower. Basically, they turn off the PA system. They will dim the lights. It's for people who have sensitivities to stimulus and things like that.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to have that happen in an artist alley.
That would be interesting. I think it would be interesting to have that comic convention wide as like a designated hour for people with, photosensitivity. And it's not just autistic people who need this either. Yeah. It's also people who are prone to seizures and epileptic fits who could benefit a lot from these sorts of things. And also thinking about when you were talking about grocery stores just a second ago, a lot of the grocery stores in my area have an hour reserved once a week for the elderly and people with autoimmune issues. And I think, at least if comic conventions are smart about this, they could do something similar at comic conventions, especially if they're a multi-day thing, where they could set an hour or two aside for the elderly and people with autoimmune issues to go and enjoy the venue.
Yep. One other thing I want to throw out there, while cons are doing all this, this is a really interesting time for cons to start fixing stuff, because they're going to have to rewrite a bunch of their policies, at least temporarily anyway. One of the big things, and I think Kelsey knew I was eventually going to bring this up, I have friends with the Cosplayer Survivor Support Network.
I wondered when you were going to bring it up.
Yep. Which is an organization that helps cons developing their harassment policies and improving them. And they recently, as I understand it, became an LLC. So they're getting official.
Oh my gosh.
Pretty awesome.
Well, to them.
Yeah. This is honestly a great time for cons to start thinking about that kind of stuff. Because I get that it can be really hard to change standing policies because you're worried about how this stuff's going to work. You're changing stuff anyway. This is a good opportunity to actually go in there, go over your policy and try to fix stuff. Honestly, that's also one of the problems. And I've had conversations with Trixie, who runs that organization, about with digital cons, there are all kinds of harassment challenges with figuring out how to do this stuff online that we don't entirely know how that's going to work. Mods obviously are part of it, but
they're not the full picture.
They're not the full picture. It's really hard to know what challenges you're going to come across when you're trying to do something that big, that widespread, and still deal with these issues. But it's something that right now is a good time to try and figure out. Like, we're actually in a position where we can experiment, we can test this stuff, and if it doesn't work, this is a crazy time. It's just one of the things that didn't work. We learn, we move on.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think we're going to be seeing. I'm really hoping we'll see some serious changes done to cons while they have the opportunity.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Stevie, what are your thoughts?
Oh gosh, I mean, definitely. The thing is, though, is that as these cons exploded, they pushed the limits of how many people they could pack in, like a sardine can, into these cons to up the money factor, to make sure that people were bringing enough money into the table, into the convention, because it's all about how much money is going into that floor. Who's spending money on the exclusives? Who's spending money on, this and that? So I think having an hour or two each morning for people with these issues, to get in there and be able to enjoy it. I mean, that would be just great, just for the general goodwill of the community, and they have money too. I mean, consumer is a consumer, so they're leaving money on the table by not addressing that, in my opinion.
Yeah. I think too, you're going to see a lot more people booking tickets online and fewer people selling tickets at the door.
Yeah.
Because they want to control for crowds and control for how many people they let in one day.
That would be amazing, because just the stress that I feel when I'm at the table of just looking out there and just to see if people, it's hard to communicate with someone who's standing right in front of you at your booth, right, or your table, with all this stuff going on. I think the interactions, I think it hurts personal interaction having so much going on.
Oh yeah.
It's funny because there's this one very, very, very tiny comic fest in Columbus. It's the Indie Comic Fest at the Ace of Cups is what it's called.
I thought that's what you were going to talk about.
Yeah. It's at a bar called the Ace of Cups. And it only, honestly, it's starting to get reasonably big. They have I'd say they have fewer than 20 tables, and it's all local people. But the thing that's funny to me, it's like one day in a bar. So most of the people who are coming in are not coming for the con, they're coming for the bar.
Right.
And I have better interactions with people there than I do at big cons sometimes, just because the people who come up to the table are actually interested in what you're doing. They're not just kind of walking through.
Fact. That's true.
So there definitely is something to be said for that kind of experience. It's one of those quality over quantity type situations.
Yeah, there may be more comic conventions popping up in places that are not convention centers now that you bring that up, because there was that, like, at a bar, but there was also Youngstown Indie Creator Expo last year took place at a bowling alley, and they're not the first ones to do it in that kind of arrangement. But if they do that too, there's also, like, the venue is in charge of how many people can come in through the door and those sorts of things. So that's another thing to contend with.
One other thing to throw out there is, if you're looking for smaller cons to go back to, as opposed to, if you don't want to go to those huge sprawling crowds, good thing to look up are Zine Fests and Comic Expos. Like, those two terms generally indicate significantly smaller, especially Zine Fest. Zine Fest can be tiny.
Oh yeah.
In fact, the last Zine Fest I did, which was really good, Tiny Paper Zine Fest. They did a digital con this year, I think, and I hope they'll keep doing it. But it was at an art gallery in Columbus that had it was based out of an old retired car wash. So we were actually set up in the bays, a little bit outdoors. and it was a fantastic time. It's the only outdoor con I've done that was perfectly set up. Like I wasn't worried about rain because I was covered. And I actually had better sales there than I've had at a lot of big cons. And it cost me like $15 for a table. It was fantastic. By the way, just for reference, the biggest con I do, Otakon, $325 for the weekend. Like that's how much it cost me to get a table. This was a $15 table, and I paid it off in like 7 minutes. Wow. It was crazy. Like I had to come up and buy a book. Yeah.
Yeah, I think too you're going to see a lot more conventions move outdoors. That's not the only one that I can think of. Like there's Kennywood Comic-Con, which is organized by the same folks who do Three Rivers Comic-Con in Pittsburgh. They set up a comic convention in Kennywood, the amusement park, which you may be seeing more of that as a way for amusement parks to get attendees in through the door, is perhaps like partnerships with comic conventions.
Yeah, it's... Sorry, I was a little distracted because of Anna going, yes, Zine Fests in the comments.
I know, I've been keeping an eye on the comments too.
Yeah. That was actually one of the things that was interesting when I moved to Ohio. This is the first Zine Fest I saw in the 3 years I've been in Ohio. Because when I came, when I was at CCS, that was in Vermont. And there were Zine Fests everywhere in New England. They love their Zine Fests. They have tons of them.
They do. They do. I want to attend at least one someday. Like, I know that Mice is a thing.
Yes. Mice is an awesome one to check out. I would categorize it more as a comic expo because it's significantly larger. But
okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I got to table there once and it was fantastic. But yeah, I think it's going to be interesting seeing how the stuff happens. Another thing I was thinking with artist alleys, I can't decide if this would be good or not. I kind of thought it'd be interesting if they changed the table layout. Since in theory, I said that you want to have about half the table or so that there's like a table space between each person's table for now. I actually thought it'd be interesting if you took those extra tables and you actually set them up so that the tables kind of form a square so that the tabler is actually farther away from the person. Like there's almost a 6 foot distance at that point.
That's
probably 4 feet. I can't decide if that'd be good or not because then the tabler can't really mess with the full table display in the same way. But
I'm trying to visualize how that layout would work.
Hold on.
Are you going to draw us a diagram?
I mean, a quick one. Let me get clip video open.
While you do that, I'll go ahead and highlight some comments. My buddy Carlos, thank you for joining us, Carlos, says, I remember New York Special Edition, which was NYCC Light, pretty much an artist alley and panels. So that could be another thing that comic conventions do, is really narrow down their offerings. While it may get less people through the door, it's also the people who are looking for those things deliberately are more likely to attend those shows. So like the folks who are going to New York Special Edition are going there because they want to see the artist alleys and the panels. They're not there for movie and TV show stuff.
Yeah, it's funny though, because that's actually what a lot of smaller Comic-Cons are like, where they're basically just artist alley with panels off of them.
Oh yeah.
I am personally less of a fan of that setup.
I will be perfectly honest with you. I have mixed feelings about panels.
So
how ironic.
I know, ironic, because we're doing a virtual panel. But I think it's all in how you set it up though. Because I've been to panels where most of the time it is organized by the convention organizers, and they more or less drop you into a panel because you fit a qualifier for that panel. It's not about whether you jive with the fellow panelists or not.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah. So there was one panel that I was a part of. It was like all about working in webcomics, and I feel like they dropped me in that panel because I was the token woman.
Yeah.
For the record, I am genderqueer, so not a fan of being pegged as the token woman of any kind of panel.
Or the token anything. You know what I mean? Because it's more about who you are as an artist.
Exactly.
What do you bring to the table for the panel? Is this a story about what you create, not who you are? So.
Yeah. Whereas I felt like with particularly the Webcomics 101 panel that I was a part of, I was kind of dropped there because, oh, you're a person who does webcomics, and that was the only qualifier. The other two people also did webcomics, but they either had a day job, so they didn't make money off of it, or it was just a hobby for them. And I was the only person there who actually like managed to make a living doing that sort of thing.
Well, just to devil's advocate for a second, that actually means that it's a pretty good panel group, because you want the people who are hobbyists and the people who do it professionally. Like that seems...
In that regard, yes, it is well-rounded. But the other regard is that we were all white people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, in the past, back when I had a little more clout in the industry, my clout has completely disappeared. But I was actually able to present to Emerald City Comic-Con, to Phoenix Comic-Con, panel ideas. And you can still do that. If some conventions allow you to present panel ideas, and you bring on your own panelists, and you're basically putting on your own panel within the show, instead of, like you're saying, being thrown into it. I've been thrown into some panels too, which some were really cool, but some of them ended up being absolute hilarity, or just people that were there that took it over and wouldn't which is, but you know, maybe finding a way to present your ideas and bring in people that you know are going to, you know, bring something to the table. But that's always been, I mean, panels have always been dicey, but I've had some great ones in the past, so I like them. If I'm going to do a convention, I kind of want to be on at least 3 or 4 panels. I think any more than that takes away from your energy level. Yeah. So sometimes they'll see, like, we're going to throw you on 7 panels, and it takes away from your time at the table too, interacting with people, making sales. So there has to be a balance.
I think one perk of go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that most of the times I've been involved in panels, it has been either me or someone I know setting up the panel and controlling who's on the panel. Like that is for the most part how it works. Like you said, most of the cons I've been involved with, you have to submit an application, what your panel is going to be. If you can, show a video of a previous panel or something similar, and they kind of try to vet it that way. So that is happening for the most part. I have also been on a panel where they basically just said, any tabler who wants, come on up. That was fun too, but like it was kind of that crazy chaotic energy.
My thoughts too were about thinking about panels and online conventions. One perk of online conventions is that you can have panels and you can display like a link to your online store at the bottom of the screen. Because one of the drawbacks of physical conventions is that unless you have a table buddy, a table assistant, or an exceptionally nice table neighbor, you're more than likely going to close up your booth in order to present at a panel. But with an online setup like this one, you can just display your shop link at the bottom, and you can hypothetically make sales while you are presenting.
I will say this: there's talking about the table buddy. There's no better feeling than coming back from a panel and your table buddy or somebody who's watching the booth goes, "Oh, here's some cash. I sold some books." You're like, yes, that is like the best feeling in the world.
I will say, like, table buddies are the best stress reliever ever because you're not alone back there. Like when you start to get a little bit stir crazy in the convention hall, and it happens, you can always like kind of back off, and the other person takes up sales. You switch places for that. If you need to use the bathroom, you're not closing your table. Like I've done Otakon twice, and that is a crazy marathon. You're doing something like it's a 25-hour work weekend, something like that. Like Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and both times I've soloed it, and it is nuts because I'm like, I will leave my table for 5 minutes to get dinner and come back. And it's so much easier when you can just have someone there who's sharing the load a little bit. Like MatsuriCon's a good example. Kelsey, you and I were
we tabled at MatsuriCon together.
And I ran a panel, and I helped someone else out with another panel. And anytime I needed to, bye, Kelci.
Yep.
This is when I'll be gone.
Yep. And I was like, I got this.
I will. Oh, sorry.
Oh no! Didn't Phoenix Comic-Con have people cover your booth for panels, if I remember correctly? Because we were there, and didn't people come by and say, "Hey, you have a panel"? They had a really good system of like, here are your panels, your time and stuff. And I think they had designated people that watched your table for you. So maybe that's an idea for conventions to do. Have like a staff that will cover your table if you don't have a buddy.
Yeah.
Some cons that have big enough staff have table minders, and it's a great thing to have. Also, runners who will go by and check to see if anyone needs water and things like that are nice. I had an idea a while back that I don't think any con has implemented, but I would love to see. But I want there to be a staffer in plain clothes, so it's not obvious they're a staffer, but that you can text to come by and pretend to be a customer at your table.
Ooh,
That's interesting.
Yeah, just not like, oh, I'm trying to boost sales here, but sometimes you get a table barnacle, like one of those people who comes up, is not going to buy anything, but is talking and kind of blocking the table and preventing you from being able to do anything else.
Oh, yeah.
And you can't get away from it because, you don't want to be rude, and maybe they'll buy something is what you're hoping. But if the easiest way to disconnect a barnacle is if another customer comes up and you start dealing with that customer. So I just want a number you can text where a staffer will come up and pretend to buy something so you can deal with that, and the barnacle will leave.
Yeah. Also a handy tactic for particularly minority creators who have somebody who's lingering around the table and is perhaps trying to like make passes at the person, and they're getting increasingly uncomfortable.
Yeah, I was going to bring up harassment again as another reason why this might be useful.
Because I've had that.
Yep.
Wow.
By the way, I have set up on SharePlay the setup I meant with the double table.
Yes, I was going to bring that up. Okay, so this was the proposed idea of having, it looks like two tables right next to each other to enforce the social distancing.
Basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, just as a given, all tablers would have to wear masks.
Well, I would hope that it would be a requirement for all attendees to wear a mask.
I would hope so too. I'm worried about enforcement. I'm sure they'll figure out a way to do it. Like that's going to be a tough thing.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, the majority of cons I've been to do tend to lean left. So my guess is that the majority of the people there will be okay with masks. But I mean, there's always going to be the bad apple, and I really wonder how staff's going to be able to deal with that, because it's got to be a tough issue.
Yeah.
Especially at an event that size. Like, that's part of why you need to cut down the numbers.
Yeah.
One other thing I was wondering is if there'd be virtue for multi-day cons to only sell tickets for people to go one day.
Yeah. I mean, I know that there is already like conventions that offer one-day tickets, and it's like Friday only, Saturday only, Sunday only.
Right.
Yeah. And there could be something to be said of having just a designated day for people who are elderly or have immunocompromised issues to have just a day. I know I talked about like an hour out of a day, but like they could have a day.
Yeah. That's another way that could be done. I was more thinking just in general. That's a way you could get more people to come to your con just for a slightly shorter amount of time, so you could do population control. Like theoretically, you could have the same total number of attendees over a weekend. They're just not there as many days, which some people would be upset about. I could see, though, being a reasonable exchange, at least for locals.
Yeah, I could see more people wanting to minimize their exposure and being like, okay, I'm only going to go for one day, because if I go for 3 days, that exposes me to more people.
Right.
Yeah. My roommate Alex would like to interject.
They would have to redo pricing for those, because a lot of the times if you go one day, it's only maybe $5 to $10 cheaper than just buying a whole 3-day pass.
I don't know
it's
if
just not worth it a lot of the time to only go one day.
Yeah. For folks who may not have heard, she did bring up that you would have to address the pricing issues, because sometimes a lot of folks will price their conventions so that a 3-day pass is only $5 extra over a single day pass.
Right. Yeah, it's most of the cons I've been to, it's not quite that extreme. It's like getting all 3 days is cheaper than buying them individually, but it's usually not quite the same markdown. Like I want to say it's $60 a day or $150 for the weekend, like that kind of thing. Like you're saving $30 by doing that. You could buy 2 days and it'd still be cheaper than the 3 day.
The biggest culprit that I can see for pricing the way that we were just talking about would be anime conventions, because a lot of anime conventions are guilty of like, a single day pass is $35, but a 3-day pass is $40.
Yeah, the anime conventions are some of the most expensive. To be fair, they do tend to have some of the most involved stuff, other than like the really big Comicons. Like I have not, to be fair, I haven't been to New York Comic-Con or San Diego Comic-Con, like the big epitomes of what a Comic-Con is supposed to be. Yeah. I've only been to the smaller ones, which are pretty much an artist alley with panel rooms off of it for the most part. Anime cons tend to be gigantic.
That's true. What were you saying, CB?
Oh, big is not always better for those conventions. Having been at the first New York Comic-Con when they had to shut the convention hall down because of the fire hazard that the attendees were there, or just San Diego in general. I mean, it's sensory overload.
Yeah.
So
that sensory overload's definitely a problem. Actually, that's one of the reasons that digital cons might find more of a footing, just because if you need to, you can attend. Well, you can always attend as much of a con as you want to. It's really tempting when you've spent the money just to be there 24/7. But if you need to take breaks, take breaks.
Yeah.
But with digital cons, it's a lot easier to do that, even in the middle of a thing, even if you're like in a Zoom call panel, which I don't know how those work, so I can't really talk about that too much.
Well, it looks like Big Happy Jet is that Anna that you said?
Yep. I've been on 2 online panels. It was weird. Yeah.
I believe it. They're still figuring out the formula. Like I've done 1 digital con so far. It was
same.
CyberCon.
Which one?
CyberCon.
That was it. Yeah.
Yeah. And you also
that was so strange in structure because it all took place on Facebook.
Yeah.
Weird. Oh, I remember that. I think
I like the idea. I want to be clear. I think CyberCon was kind of on the right track with a lot of this stuff. We didn't know what was going to happen. So
I think Wrathacon had a better structure though, because Wrathacon moved entirely online. What they did was they had a website, and originally they just had their website set up back when they had in-person conventions. They had their website set up to be like a photo gallery of conventions past. Here's a schedule of events. Here's the list of artists who are exhibiting and their social media profiles. And they still kept most of that. But in the online version of it, they set up a Discord channel for attendees to just get into a chat room and chat with each other, and various channels for different topics. And I don't remember if they had like panels set up in the Discord, but that's an option for people to possibly pursue. But they also had the panel schedule, and those panels took place on other people's YouTube channels. So it was a way to like signal boost other creators' YouTubes. And they also had the Artist Alley page, and the Artist Alley page just had links to everybody's shops, and they didn't have to like set up an actual booth.
I'm kind of worried about that. Like that's actually something that I've been trying to figure out how that would work. One of the big advantages for me with in-person sales is I have terrible luck with digital sales. I really don't have. I kind of suspect that most people who do the digital cons in particular, or as attendees, are not looking to pay for anything because it's a free con, and they're kind of just, they're getting free content watching the streams and things like that. I don't know how you translate that into buy from my online store. Like, I haven't quite figured that out yet. Like, maybe you've had better luck.
I think that's something that people are going to have to figure out and work towards moving forward. I think that's another cog in the what conventions look like in the future machine that people are going to need to figure out is how do we translate viewers into sales for the people who are participating in our event? So
one other thing with that I've been interested in, and this is kind of long game speculative fiction practically, because this is a long shot, but this is what I kind of think would be awesome.
Okay.
I've been having some conversations with some of my gamer friends about this, and there's a gaming technology that I think if this all had happened in 5 years, that this would be what was defining all the digital cons right now. VR.
Oh, yeah.
VR tech is finally becoming available to the masses for the most part. Like, it's not universal yet, but the tech is really getting there. I think that VR conventions might be a thing in about 5 years. I really think that's going to start happening. And right there, I would absolutely love to set up a VR artist alley of some kind. I think that would be so interesting.
So you'd basically just be walking through a convention floor via VR, and your booths would be set up, and you'd be sitting there with your VR thing on and actually interacting with these avatars within this space.
There is something like this that's been done. I came across it by accident recently. There's a software on the PS4 called Dreams, which is the whole idea behind it is it's a game making system and platform for PS4. So a console user can make a video game. And it's a really cool idea. It also has like a social media element built into it where you can see other people's games and you can take elements from it if they've given permission, so you can reuse assets. But one of the things that they had, because I was watching a friend play it, is they did a thing, it was called like DreamsCon or something like that, where you could, they basically set up a fake convention floor with booths that were each designed by one of the indie devs on Dreams, and you could go and check out elements of their stuff. And they created a fake digital floor you could walk around with a little doofy looking avatar. Like, none of this was high res. The avatar basically looked like one of those figure drawing models, like little wooden ones. You know what I'm talking about? But they had like a fake people walking around the floor. And I was watching my friend play this, and I nearly cried because I was like, I needed this social experience of walking through a convention center. But they had things like pre-recorded panels where they'd asked each of the panelists specific questions, and you could walk up to a microphone and choose one of those panelists and choose that question, and you'd get their answer. Like, they had such cool ideas with this, and I just feel like the next step might be a couple years away and could be really interesting.
Yeah.
That is interesting.
That would be interesting. The drawback that I could see with that is who has access to the VR technology.
That's why I say 5 years from now. I think VR is going to start, like, it's been around now for a few years, and it's started to become big among gamers. That's going to be about it for a while, just because we're not casually getting VR. We're getting VR if we play video games.
Right.
So it's a specific clientele.
Well, I've actually been tracking a lot of these companies via some of my investments. So there is a future in what you're discussing. Yeah. So I know my brother Nick, who does a lot of accessibility work for banks and companies like that. I mean, they're even thinking ideas like that as well. So I totally agree with you. I don't know if it's going to be 5 years or 10. It's definitely going to happen at some point sooner than we probably expect.
Yeah. Like, I am very excited for that. And it looks like Carlos has some feedback. Yeah.
Yeah. Devolver Digital made a virtual E3 with trailers for viewing. Which, did E3 happen already?
It's kind of happening.
Okay.
In fact, that's also something that's kind of happening this weekend. Xbox actually just had its big announcements about the new. I'm sorry, I'm going to sigh every time I say this name. The Xbox Series X. the stupidest named console in
Xbox
ages.
Series X.
I mean, you know what really annoys me about that? When they were developing it, its code name was Project Scarlet.
Mm-hmm.
The Xbox Red or the Xbox Scarlet's such a better name.
Yeah.
The Xbox Series X. It's almost like a joke in a. It's.
Sorry for that quick sidetrack, but the point I was
not apologize.
was that they recently did their big announcement for what that's going to involve and all the games. Like they did an hour-long stream to show that. Mm-hmm. And the other thing they've been doing this weekend is all the stuff that would normally be shown on the E3 floor from small devs, like showing off new games that they're having come out and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. They made those demos available for download and play this weekend only on Xbox Live. Mm-hmm. And so that's been sort of their way of dealing with E3. I actually think the gaming companies might be the ones that do the best with because their cons were always a little bit more exclusive anyway. Like E3, the general public generally can't go to E3. For the most part, it's only industry people and media people.
So it could be that comic conventions could have a lot to learn from video game companies and organizations.
Totally, because I play some games on my phone and iPad, and they have their championships live, and you'll get a link, and it takes you right to their YouTube channel, and you're watching these people play these games on here, and it's like the showmanship aspect of it is what interests me. They have actual hosts there, personalities that you get to know. Yeah, that might be something that comic books needs to look into, is to have more personalities that are there to engage people and keep them interested. Like it's like you're producing like a YouTube show or a TV show. Yeah. You know, if there's a way to evolve into something like that, I would attend those things more. Okay. You know, if you bring on a famous comic book writer or artist or movie producer or something, you know, the moderator, stop calling them moderators, call them hosts, you know, and have it's just, they're going to have to like make these things more exciting, more engaging, because as time goes on, as you're talking about VR and all this, people, we're getting used to being at home now. You know what I mean? We're getting used to watching movies, like big budget movies, on our TV screens. I don't even want to get into what I think is going to be the future of movies. That's a whole different thing. But
maybe we can have another panel about that next week.
There you go. My brother actually works for a new movie studio called Solstice, just to bring this in there. And they have a movie coming out called Unhinged with Russell Crowe. And it's supposed to be like the first movie back in theaters, but they won't let them show the movie until there's another big budget movie coming out around the same time, so they can get this system rolling again. You know what I mean?
Right.
So
you know,
go ahead. I went off on kind of a tangent, but it does kind of relate because people are dealing with these things.
It reminds me of something that I was thinking a little while back that I wanted to see. I think this is a great opportunity for people to start making smaller movies in a lot of ways. Like, I think it'd be really interesting because I imagine a lot of the people who are quarantined in the film industry, like Hollywood professionals and stuff like that, could very easily figure out ways to tell entire stories that take place from their house. Because so many of these people have enough means that they have large homes that they would be able to do something with. And I want them to make movies with incredibly limited cast, like whoever they're quarantined with, that have nothing to do with quarantine whatsoever. Like that's not why they're in the house.
Right.
But I will not watch a quarantine movie. I just can't do it.
But that's my point. Like, it's so tempting to just be like, oh yeah, we're doing this about this situation. I'm like, no, you have go back to your days when you were a student and you were figuring out how to tell these stories. You could make The Shining out of something like that. Like, because The Shining pretty much takes place in one building the entire time.
Yeah. Didn't Paranormal Activity just take place in one house?
For the most part, yeah.
Honestly, horror is a good example of this, because so much of horror is low budget, like nothing.
Yeah. You can shoot a movie on your iPhone. The iPhone 11 has 4K capabilities. If you buy, it's all about lighting and sound. Yeah. You know? So if you're able to have the setting and have the correct lighting and sound, and you've got a 4K transfer in there, then you could make a movie in one room. And then
Getting back to the topic of hosts and things like that, I do think that is a problem that a lot of the creator community has, because a lot of us are good at making comics and stuff like that, and are not good at crowd interaction, and are not good at being salesmen.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's one of the big problems indie people have anyway. Like I do my best with a lot of this stuff. I am not a good salesman. I
I like doing in-person sales, and that's part of the tricky bit is the technique of selling things in person are different from selling things online. And that's probably one of the biggest hurdles for anybody who's selling content like online and transitioning from a physical convention space to a digital one.
Well, I think with online is you have to have people invest in you personally. And that's one of the disconnects, I think, with online sales is that people don't want to feel like you're selling them something. You know, they want to feel like, oh, I have just discovered this. I've discovered you. I like you. And now I want to buy this from you. And then there's that sweet spot moment to when it clicks and they go, oh, I have to buy this now. This is going to this is all me. And unlocking that online, I think, can be difficult.
There's a cartoonist. He's a writer specifically. Josh Dahl out of I want to say Massachusetts, somewhere in New England. I met him at a con where the con was. I'm not going to name the con because it was really bad.
Worse than Put and Play.
No, I had a better time at Put and Play. I will say that.
Wow, so this was bad.
This was bad. Here's the thing. I walked around the artist alley after a while. It was a 2-day con, and I went with a bunch of people, and the second day I went alone because the other people bailed because they were like, this con sucks. And they didn't want to spend another day because it was in Massachusetts, so it was a 2-hour drive each way, and because we weren't staying. I decided to go back and keep running the table, and I walked around and talked to a lot of the other tablers, and basically nobody made table. It was really bad. The only people I know that made table was Josh and his artist partner. Like, that's the only ones. They happen to be the table right next to me. And Josh is a hard seller. Like, it was great because I'd watch people like, this was a Comic-Con, so there are a lot of people who are kind of just walking around the artist alley, not buying things. That happens a lot at Comic-Cons. I'm sorry to single that out, but it's the thing. And there was a thing where people would walk by his table, and I kept hearing the same thing over and over again because he had a comic about a supervillainess who was getting revenge on people who betrayed her, kind of like a Kill Bill style superhero comic. But yeah, it sounded awesome. But what he was saying was his pitch was like, "Hey, you like superheroes? You like revenge?" And like he'd bring it in, and he'd show them the comic. He'd actually flip to his favorite parts and show them the thing, and he was making bank. And I went up to him and I talked to him, and I was like, "Dude, you're basically spoiling your book every single time you do this. How is this working?" And he said something I will never forget. He said, "People don't come to my table to buy books. They come to have a Comic-Con experience. That's what I'm selling them. They're getting the book as a bonus."
That's pretty cool. Yeah, that makes sense.
That's the entire reason that people go to Comic-Cons is to have an experience, not necessarily to buy books.
Right. Which is funny because I absolutely go to buy books, but I'm an artist. Like, that's what we do. I take that back. I used to go to buy books. Now I can't afford to. Now it's just.
Carlos brought up a good point. Home shopping network might be a key mentality. I am not too familiar with home shopping networks, so that's something that perhaps indie comic artists or people who want to sell their stuff online need to look into.
Well, I think with the home shopping network, there's hosts. You know,
I was about to say, you have a host. Someone comes on to talk about what their product is. The host is interviewing them. This is a great idea, actually. Like, this is like, just as an example, if Kelci, you were the host because you're good at talking people.
Thank you.
But like, if you you have an artist who comes out for 5 minutes, talks about their comic. You do basically a quick interview. There's information on where you can get it, like what they can get. Maybe there's a QR code on the screen, or there's links that are being put up.
Your links at the bottom of the screen. Scrolling down right now.
Also, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.
Like, notifications.
Subscribe.
Smash that like button. Anyway, but yeah, I think there's actually definitely an interesting point to that.
Here's something we can add to that: is if a convention brings on, say the convention's running this, like the Home Shopping Network. The convention would then be involved in the fulfillment of the sales potentially of these books, and can make money that way. If they go into a partnership with somebody, say we've got 100 copies of Ben's new book, Cospain here, and the first 100 people are going to get it. You're going to get a free gift. You know what I mean? Yeah. And Ben, tell us about the book. And then the number pops up on the screen, or the link pops up. People click on it, and they're buying. For that moment, there's like a sense of urgency, it being part of the experience, so there's
a good idea.
Ways
to
do this.
So who wants to start an online convention with me where we can be the host and we sell people stuff on commission?
That's a pretty amazing idea, actually.
I'd be down for that, honestly. Like, when this all started, I actually was thinking I kind of want to try to set up a con. A digital con specifically, and see what that would involve. The reason I didn't is because then CyberCon happened, and I was like, oh, someone else is already doing this. I'm just going to jump on that because I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah. Tim brings up a comment. If the creators aren't good salesmen, then is it their fault if con goers don't buy things?
Well, I should clarify what I meant when I was talking about that. There are, with a lot of the smaller Comicons, one of the things that gets a little bit tricky is that there's very often the main room that everyone is going through is the artist alley. There's no distinction between that and the rest of the area, which means there are a lot of people who are there just for the con. They're not necessarily there to be in the artist alley to shop. In something like an anime con, you're more likely to have the artist alley be a separate designated space. So everyone in there is a potential customer. Yeah. This was actually a problem when I started making Cospain. Part of why I wanted to do it is I found out that there were a lot of artists who hate cosplayers. And I was shocked by this. I was like,
oh my gosh. Yeah, it's a thing. I've met comic writers who are like, God, I do not like cosplayers.
When I started being a cosplayer at cons, when that was how I started out, I didn't it was weird to me because I was always buying stuff in the convention center. And as I talked to people, I realized what the problem is. Especially at things classified as Comicons, the cosplayers are often there not so much to shop, but they're kind of in that same area just to do the cosplay thing, and they very often are taking up space and not being seen to buy stuff. And this is not the case at all cons. This is not the case with all cosplayers. And the other big thing is a lot of cosplayers buy stuff on the third day when they're not in costume. So they're in the artist alley shopping, and then they come back later, but they're not in costume, so people don't know it's them.
Well, a pretty good example of that was I used to do a show called Dragoncon, and Dragoncon takes place in Atlanta over Labor Day each year. And that was one of the first really big science fiction comic book conventions that they had a costume parade. You're talking 2005, before cosplay really took off. That was Cosplay Central. Everybody was in costume, but people, they would buy stuff on the second, third, fourth. It actually takes place over 5 days.
Oh my gosh!
In downtown Atlanta. So that was like a utopian a landscape of cosplayers that bought things, and people were excited to be there. And it was a 24-hour convention. There were panels running at 4 a.m. in the morning, people gaming. It was amazing. So if there was a way to bring that sort of spirit into it, and really, as a comic book writer, I've too wrestled with the idea of cosplay at shows, and Kelci and I have actually dealt with cosplay conventions in our comic validation. I mean, it's like a whole year's worth of comics about cosplay.
Oh my gosh, we've done so many comic strips about just conventions as a whole.
But we're moving on from that. We're going into different realms now. I mean, I think we've had our say about comic book conventions in our comic. Where
yeah, but I do want to clarify.
Sorry.
Yeah, I do want to make sure I'm being clear. I love cosplayers. Like, I make an entire comic about cosplayers, and a big part of why I did that comic is because I wanted my cartoonist friends who had this bias to kind of see the other side, and it's been nice. And the other thing is, whenever they do that, I say go to an anime con because the vibe is completely different.
Oh,
like
yeah.
Dragoncon, the vibe is different.
Yeah. Carlos has a really interesting comment.
Yeah, a very, very Starship Stream ran a very, very shopping network where they interviewed comic creators and pitched their stuff during canceled convention weekends.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
We need to find a link for that because that's exactly what we were just speculating on, which is fantastic. One of the things I love about this is you don't have to be the first to come up with this idea. The more people that do it, the better. Like, this could be really interesting if it's done right.
The more people who do these things, the more that the troubleshooting can happen. They can be like, oh, so this person ran it, but there were these kinds of kinks. Let's work those out in our version. And then somebody else who comes afterward is like, oh, so they learned this, but in their setup, there was that problem that was an issue. But we can address this by doing this thing.
Right. Like, that's actually, I don't know. There are so many different ways we could do it. I think there should be something to be said for maybe advertising pays for a lot of this stuff too, because that's sort of how everything works online now.
I don't know. I don't base a lot of my income in my income streams on advertising. Advertising is just not one of my branches.
Yeah, when you're small, definitely, and I think we're all small. No offense, but you have to hit a certain level with YouTube.
I want to be smaller.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, you have to hit a certain level with YouTube and Twitch to start getting ad revenue. But if you're doing a convention and you could theoretically get large enough for that pretty easily, I feel like that might be a good way to do it because that's so.
We talked about sponsors before for the in-person conventions, and they would have to go to get sponsorships just to even print materials.
Right.
So the sponsorships for digital spaces could help pay for web hosting, for the streaming services, for the chat room softwares. It could cover a lot of other different things that are not necessarily physical, but are important to the virtual convention experience.
And it wouldn't be as obtrusive as like the old school pop-up ads, or
it would
be like, hey, Coca-Cola sponsors this convention, and there's like a logo behind you. You know that it's just innocuous.
Or even like the ads that they have on YouTube. I actually think YouTube's one of the best examples of how to handle ads, except that you can't block ads that you find offensive, which really bothers me. But you can. If an ad is going to be 15 seconds or longer, you can skip it after 5 seconds. Like, that's, first off, thank you for doing that. That's so much better than a lot of them.
Or how about Facebook, who sometimes puts the ads in the middle of the video? Do they still do that? They were doing that in the beginning.
YouTube does that too, actually.
Here's one workaround for this, for people who don't want ads in the middle of their convention experience. I've seen a lot of YouTube people, if they get sponsored for a particular video, they'll either save the sponsorship ads they'll either put it in the beginning, or they'll have a segment in the middle where they talk about their sponsor, or they wait until the very end where they talk about their sponsor.
And that's actually a great example. It's the old school radio style where they're doing a live ad, basically. It's not something pre-recorded. It's not a the same thing every week. The McElroy brothers are great about this. They always have sponsors, and they do a brand new video, it's a podcast, brand new audio every single time for their ad sponsors, and it's often entertaining and funny.
They do that with the sports stuff too. Like, if you're listening to us, I'm really big into sports. I know a lot of people aren't. In comics, it's hard to find people that are into sports. So, but anyway, so with these baseball announcers,
sport, you're fine.
Okay, cool. Speak sport. Okay, great. It's good. It's good to know somebody knows this language. So they're like, hey, this radio thing that like a radio show you're talking about, they'll say who their sponsors are right before the commercial break and then come back. So there's ways to do it that aren't going to feel like obtrusive to the audience.
Yeah.
Everything old is new again. I think that's going to be more true now moving forward than ever before today. Carlos like, sports, you would know. You like wrestling.
Yeah.
Like, he has a badge. Anytime that he's a table assistant of mine in the area shows that he's in, he will have a button like this one on his person that says, talk to me about wrestling. And lo and behold, people will come up to the table, notice the button, and they will just talk to him about wrestling. I have something similar that's like, talk to me about Dragon Ball Z, because I will talk to your ear off for days about that.
I may need to do that because my friends at the Cosplayer Survivor Support Network just got a button machine, and I'm thinking I may need to take advantage of that. I've been debating a little bit because, we're not going to be going back to cons particularly soon, so I'm like, do I want to make buttons right now?
Mm-hmm. The true sport.
Yeah. Actually, that reminds me, because we did talk about this in the stream last weekend. You and I were discussing a little bit, like, ignoring the actual quarantine and pandemic issue.
Yeah.
We were already kind of thinking about not doing cons as much anymore.
Yeah. And this was something that somebody brought up in a comment earlier, and I wasn't sure how to tie it in, was lately a lot of professionals have been experiencing convention burnout and have been like pulling their attendance back. And they were saying as much at the start of this year.
Yeah,
I got burned out in 2010, so I'm
jumped on that train early.
Yeah. But we were talking last week specifically about the numbers when we were looking at how much we were making at these cons. This is something a lot of people don't realize. The vast majority of tablers are not making money at cons.
Nope.
Like, I think this is a pretty safe blanket statement, because their expenses are high enough that even if they do really well in sales, like the con I had the most gross sales at was Otakon 2019.
Yeah.
And I believe my sales were about $560 over the weekend. And that maybe covered half my expenses.
Yeah.
Like it's so rare that you end a con in the black.
Oh yeah.
And I was specifically doing my math for last year, which was my most successful con year. And I made more money, and I'm using gross here. I'm not even looking at, I'm using the numbers before you factor in expenses. I made more money gross from a single 1-month Kickstarter than I did in an entire year of doing cons. Like, there's a problem here. And digital cons might be a solution to that, because overhead's cheaper. You don't have to pay for hotels. You don't have to pay extra for food. You don't have to pay for travel.
The reason that I was doing conventions in the 2000s was the networking and to build your audience, Yeah. And I think that since that time, it's shifted into more of this, oh my gosh, there's a kitty cat.
Bree jumped into my lap.
So, and related to that, because that's exactly how I tried to use my cons, and I think Kelsey's more successful with that. But
you're just flattering me. My goodness.
Yeah, but I built up a mailing list over the last couple of years, and what was interesting to me is that, as far as I can tell, the whole idea was like, that's the main reason I'm doing cons, is like getting this network so that when I do things like Kickstarters, I have a lot of people that are following me that can do stuff. And as far as I can tell, I'm still doing the mailing list. Love you guys. I'm very happy that you guys are following me. As far as I can tell, I'm not sure it made me any money. Which is,
I mean, there's softwares to help you track how many people arrive at a particular page from different sources. For me personally, the email newsletter is the best way to get people to back a Kickstarter, because you can send an email out as soon as you launch, being like, hey, by the way, there's early bird specials, and lo and behold, lots of the early bird specials get snatched up. I did the big thing that was successful for me, and I want to go ahead and apologize because I hated doing this. Okay.
I PM'd every single person that follows me on social media, letting them know about the Kickstarter. I felt so dirty doing it, but I actually had talked to multiple people about it, and they were all like, yeah, do it. Whatever. It's one message. Who cares? And I think I had maybe 3 people across all my social media unfollow me because of it. And I got a bunch of hits because of it. Like, it actually worked.
Yeah.
I still felt
we did something similar with Never Ending, but though we reached out to people who were in the field that Never Ending pertained to, and reached out to people who had way more followers than us. So something.
It makes sense. And I mean, I hope I got you something with the little video I did. Like, that kind of thing is how a lot of the online stuff's going to be working. Because a lot of it's going to end up being friends of friends who are just like, hey, check this stuff out.
Yeah. Anna brought up a point. There's so much more competition online, and because people aren't in the buyer mindset, which I don't know. I think more people are going to be in the buyer mindset moving forward because of, I don't know about what the situation is at where you both are, but lots more places are going to be closing down because of the spikes recently. So a lot more people are going to be shopping online.
Virginia, I'm in Virginia right now, and it's been okay. But yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah. Ohio is experiencing big spikes, so they're starting to close everything down again. But taking a look at the comments here, I think at a certain point you have to go to the cons you want to be at anyway. That was my original plan for this year, was to only go to the conventions that I wanted to go to. The ones that I was like, okay, I've been historically successful at this convention before, I will go back there again.
Yeah.
And just not saying yes to conventions that I had not been to before. Because I think that was starting to bite me, was looking at a convention that I had not attended before and being like, okay, I'll give this a shot. And then it turns out that it's not successful for one reason or another.
I'm kind of the opposite, just because I try to go to as many different cons as I can, because I need the material. Like, it's part of my comic. Like, that's part of what's been really interesting about lockdown. It's like, what the hell do I write about now?
Yeah.
But it's it's funny because I really like going to a wide variety, because you never really know what cons are going to work for you until you've done them.
That's true. That's true. Because, like, in some ways, anime conventions work better for you and me, Ben, than Comicons. But in some ways, Comicons are better poised for certain products. So, like, anime conventions, I think, are more poised, I think, for prints of things. Whereas comic conventions are more poised for books. Just generally speaking, there's outliers, but that's what I noticed.
It's funny because I really expected my prints to be what did well at anime cons, because that's always what I saw coming up. In fact, part of the reason I made Cost Pain was I wanted to sell the strips as prints. Like, that was the idea. And those barely sell at anime cons. The books sell great. Like, because the funny thing is, it's a big fish in a small pond situation. When you go to an anime con and you're selling actual comics, you're in the minority. So your table stands out.
Yeah, because a lot more, you do bring up a good point. A lot more artists at anime conventions are there selling prints of their stuff, not necessarily books.
Yeah, and there are plenty who are doing both. I do both. But it's interesting because it can be tough to stand out with a lot of that stuff. But yeah, I do think I am really curious how online consoles do the Artist Alley thing. I really like the home shopping network idea.
Yeah. Anna brings up a good point. The cons that I sell to are different people than my online audience, which is a good point. And also, your online audience is going to differ based on what social media that you use. Like, I will admit, when I left Facebook like 2 months ago, it's been 2 months since I left.
That's
Facebook.
why I couldn't find your name when I was doing the social media posts on this. Okay,
yeah,
cool.
Because I deactivated my Facebook account 2 months ago because I was tired of supporting Mark Zuckerberg and the platform as a whole, because I made an entire blog post about my reasons why I left as a small business and as a person. I will say that leaving it as a business, there were a couple of people who were like, well, this is going to stink because Facebook was the only social media that I used. But then there were other people who found me through other social media, primarily Instagram, who followed me on there instead. So there is something to be said about like, what social media do you use? What do you use to sell your stuff? And how accessible is it for people? Do those people have accounts on those platforms? Can they engage with you there, etc.? Which personally, I think more online conventions should do the Wrathicon route, which is that Wrathicon has its own website. Like CyberCon was on the right track, but keeping it entirely on Facebook makes it harder for the people who do not have a Facebook account to attend.
It's true. Like, that's one of the things. I do think that they were smart to do the system that they did. It was at least good to try. Mm-hmm. The big thing with that was it had basically no moderation, but the way it was set up was the people who were doing videos associated with it were self-moderating and self-promoting through the CyberCon page. Every single person who was involved with that was made a moderator and an admin on the CyberCon page so that they could link in their stuff.
Yeah, and that got clunky real fast because I kept getting notifications of people submitting questions, and it often did not pertain to me.
Yeah, it was miserable for the creators. Like, the good news for me was that I basically ignore everything Facebook. So I wasn't getting any of those things that were directly hitting me. Mm-hmm. But it was an interesting idea because it's kind of what I thought about doing, but like with Discord, is how I kind of wanted to do it, where you have a Discord where everyone's communicating about it, talking. Like, there's one specifically, the channel specifically for admins, a channel for attendees and things like that. You can advertise in there and then post it wherever you want, on YouTube, Facebook Live, whatever. But this showed me that kind of thing probably would need a little more organization.
Yeah, Carlos brings up Twitch and YouTube have better ways to stream, also have better comment moderation.
Very true. I'm going to step away for just a minute.
That's fine. Anna also brings up, I'm a bit behind in terms of time, but are you guys going to address people's financial problems right now regarding sales? If you're talking about like sales online, we can talk about that a little bit more.
I think maybe what Anna's talking about is people's financial problems in terms of unemployment, massive unemployment in the country. Also, how is that going to affect us down the road? You know, how do we adapt? How do we create, products or books that people want to buy? How do you make them affordable? So
this is actually something that Never Ending had to contend with. Never Ending, for folks who don't know, is a company that I am the chief creative officer of. We just wrapped up a Kickstarter to develop the beta of the app that we want to develop, because we want to develop a character builder, a scene builder, and a story builder where you can create your own characters and then animate them in sequences. One of the challenges that we had was contending with backers and other backer hopefuls who wanted to back the project, whose financial situations were precarious, and also contending with the fact that unemployment benefits are running out. So this was something that I'll admit I had a little pushback about, but ultimately I was like, okay, I see the point in doing this. Where we changed the pricing a bit, because between Kickstarter and having a Game Found page, because we have a Game Found page now. And Game Found is for folks who missed the Kickstarter but still want to support the platform in some way. The pricing is a bit different between the Kickstarter and the Game Found. And in a public statement that we made, this is because we want to acknowledge that people's financial situations are different than what they were about a month ago. We want to work with everybody to the best of their ability, and we want to honor people's financial situations. And if you want to get a partial refund, we can do that. If you want to get a credit to make up the difference, we can do that too. I will admit that I was initially like about it because I didn't want to confuse people. And yet we talked about it as a team and we agreed that it was best to move forward with the price changes. The price changes aren't too drastic. They're not like half off or anything like that, but it's still enough that we wanted to make a statement about it to be like, look, we know that there's a lot going on right now. We know that people's unemployment benefits are going to run out. We know that people are either laid off or they're going to get laid off, or some people are working jobs that are not paying them because they don't have money for payroll. Which is a thing that is happening, and that's some bullshit, if you'll excuse my language. But
it's
but yeah, we're trying to contend with those realities, with those things.
Right.
So people are going to cut back on certain things and only support or buy the things that they want to buy, which I think you could see a lot of people who maybe are hobbyist type creators just sort of like, I'm going to give up for a while. But the hardcore creators, people such as ourselves, I think, are going to find a way to adapt and to address, the need. I mean, people need to be entertained, to feel, like a connection to people with art and stories and all that. I think if anything, like with the conventions that are going to have to adjust and learn how to do things better, we're going to have to learn how to like address our own creativity and how we can propel ourselves forward to even be better ourselves. I mean, that it might be a boon for a lot of people in the next few years. You're going to see a lot of amazing stuff come out potentially.
Heck yeah.
So the complacency, which we might have been, there might have been a complacency before this, pre-COVID, I guess you would call the era.
Yeah.
And now there's like a sense of urgency, a sense of like, okay, what next? Like we're talking about. I could be rambling right now too. But,
no, I think there is some validity to, there was complacency until fairly recently in a lot of ways, but especially with conventions and selling things and trying to make a living doing what we do. And I think creatives in general needed a shakeup as to how it was that they did things. I think conventions too needed a shakeup in how they did things. Because, and I'll go ahead and highlight Tim's comment here. In 2016, I went to MarCon to see S.J. Tucker, and unfortunately, they were a con in decline, desperately trying to stay at a massive space they just weren't big enough for anymore. At one point, I was flat out told that I had to spend money in the dealer's hall for them to have a con. And I could see that being a thing. I've seen conventions get either too big too fast, or they get into a big space and they're unable to fill it.
MarCon's in Columbus, right?
I don't know.
I think I know this con. I'm trying to remember what it was. I remember I thought about applying there, and they had some really weird provision in their application that made me think twice. I'm trying to remember what it was. I think I don't want to hearsay this because I could be misremembering. I just want to be clear about that. If I recall correctly, it was one of those ones where you had to pay up front when you applied, but it wasn't guaranteed that you'd get a table.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I remember seeing that and being like, hold up.
Yeah, I've seen some conventions do that, which is like a red flag.
Yeah, here's the thing. If there are cons that have you pay the full price when you apply, when you do that, what it's supposed to mean is you got a table. Like they're not screening, you just bought a table. That's fine. Like some cons, they can make that happen.
Yeah.
And
that's a big reason why I don't really participate in traditional art shows like arts festivals, is because they will charge you up front for a spot, but then they won't tell you if you have a spot there or not until the last minute.
Yeah, like that's no way to run a business, quite frankly.
No, right. It's not fair to the potential vendor. It's not fair to the organizers, and it's not fair to the customers.
And even like if you require money to apply, I even understand that. I may not be a fan, but I understand that.
Mm-hmm.
Just not the full amount. An application fee is different from actually getting a table and paying.
Yeah. Oh, I think you might have muted yourself.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now.
Okay, yeah. This headphone is on its last legs, I think.
Oh dear.
Yeah, it's been doing that during my D&D games.
Oh no, that's not good. So okay, circling back to like comic conventions of the future. The future. The future. The ghosty wavy arms.
Full on. Oh crap! It's not Bill and Ted. Wayne's World. That's what I'm thinking of.
By the way, I watched Wayne's World for the first time in many years again, and it is still pretty funny. It's still pretty funny, and there's a lot of geeky stuff in that movie. Mm-hmm. A lot of nerdy geeky stuff for the. That must have come out in 1991 or 2 or something. Long time. We're talking 30 years ago.
Oh my god!
and a lot of it. It's like, whoa, wait a second. These guys were actually ahead of the curve when it came to like geeky stuff and all that. So,
yeah.
But yeah, the future of cons.
Yes. Well, we are at the 15-minute mark. We're 15 minutes away from 3 o'clock, yo.
1 o'clock here. 1 o'clock here in.
Yes, because that's one thing that I wanted to bring up. Speaking of time zones, one thing that could help with online conventions is people being in different time zones. Like if you wanted to have a 24-hour comic convention, you could have people who are like based in Australia or Europe or any place else be either the moderators or the attendees or the people in the artist alleys during those hours when maybe other people are not attending.
That is one of the things that I thought was really cool about CyberCon is they didn't shut down that entire weekend. They didn't have to because they could have people applying to be moderators from all over the world who could just do stuff whenever they were up. I even did some late night stuff because I'm a night owl. And
that's the other thing. It can benefit night owls who maybe can't make it to the daytime hours.
Yeah.
And vampires too.
Yeah.
Vampires can attend conventions finally.
Yeah, basically all I did for that, in fact, that wasn't even on Facebook. I posted a thing saying I'm doing this over my Twitch channel, and I went and played Call of Cthulhu for 3 nights, and then stopped playing Call of Cthulhu because I wasn't into the game. But yeah, like that kind of thing could be really beneficial, especially for those interested in international audiences, which is not that big a problem for a lot of bookmakers nowadays because Ingram Spark can print internationally.
Yeah, true.
I'm sorry. I'm reading Kushida Tim's comment.
This may not be welcomed input. After 2 humble bundle comic packages, I think I have enough comics for the rest of my life.
I know the feeling. Like one of the things that is kind of bad to say, but kind of true is I barely read comics anymore because I'm working on them. Like
the funny thing is that since quarantine has started, I've been reading more.
Me too.
Good. I'm happy to hear that. Like I've been having a hard time with that. I've mostly been going to video games and YouTube. Like that's where I've been.
But you're right, Ben. Before quarantine, I don't think I bought a lot of comics since I started working professionally in the early 2000s. I've been given a lot of comics from people. Hey, check my comic, check my comic, check my comic. But it's like when you work on comics, it's a strange thing. Where you're like, I don't really have time to read it. Go ahead.
No, I've actually read a couple of Kelsey's comics because first off, really good comics. And second, like we work together a lot. So I need to know about your stuff. But also like you have some of my comics. I have no expectation that you've read my stuff just because
I've read Trinary. I've read some of your Cost Pains. I think those are the only books of yours that I have right now.
But that's just it. Like there's kind of this understanding among creators that we'll share our books, but we don't expect anyone to actually read the books because who has time?
Well, it's also like there is time if you make the time, and we find ways to keep ourselves busy in the comic sphere. And this is the problem with being a comics creator, is that you are both an artist and a small business. So
True.
Yeah. So in a small business, you find ways to keep yourself busy because you convince yourself in your brain that you are working smarter, not harder. But the fact is, you're just working harder.
Yeah. No, the real trick is to learn how to work smart and hard. Like doing both is the real trick. The other thing is, like, I just want to throw this out there because it's something that a lot of people don't understand when they go into this kind of small business.
Mm-hmm.
What you're giving up when you're a self-published creator is not just, you're not just being like, I want to have full control over everything I do and like to have nobody be able to tell me no. Well, that's first off, that can be a bad thing. Feedback can be good. And second, you kind of forget that this means that you become the printer, the publicist, you're your own agent, you're your own, all these things. And you may not be good at those things.
Yeah.
Like, you can be a fantastic cartoonist. It doesn't mean you're a good salesperson.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of the things that's been fun to learn. Like, I actually would be interested in working with a proper publisher just because it'd be nice to have someone else do the hard part for me.
Yeah.
Well,
I will say that working with Never Ending, there is something to be said about being able to delegate tasks to other people, because that has made life over at Never Ending so much easier. And now I'm looking into ways to perhaps hire assistants or get some people on board who can help run some things for me so that I don't have to do it.
Yeah, I've thought before that if I could get a publicist, it would make my life significantly easier. The problem there being, you need to be able to afford a publicist before you can get a publicist. But
yeah, that's the big issue, is if you're going to be doing these things by yourself, it's like you either accept that you're going to do everything, or you have to have the money to be able to hire other people to help you do those things.
Yeah,
I've just accepted I had to do everything. So
I had gotten to that point up until working with Never Ending, but there is still also the part of me that's like somewhat ADHD brain that's like, I like doing these different things because it occupies different parts of my mind.
Yeah. I don't know.
It's all time management too. You know what I mean? Yes. So like just thinking about hours of the day that you need to do this, this, and this, and not feeling overwhelmed,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And finding a system that works for you, which is part of why I love the Kanban method that Trello and Asana uses. It has made my life so much easier.
I may need to start using something like that. It's tough because whenever I try to set up any kind of structured work thing, the first time I mess it up, I never pay attention to it again. Like it's why I was a little freaked out when I delayed. I did a delay on Cost Pain because of the protests that were happening. There was a Blackout Tuesday thing that happened to kind of clear the airwaves just for people to talk about this specific issue. Like, let the people who need to have a voice then. And so I decided for the first time in my entire run of Cost Pain to delay the strips a day. And it was a simple thing to do that didn't matter to anyone but me, but it really mattered to me because I was freaked out that I was going to start missing deadlines because I did this.
Well, Kelci and I have fallen off the track with validation.
We have a little bit.
You know what? We're still making comics. It's really wild.
Yeah.
And we actually are, I think, probably more excited about the future of validation. Like we were gonna end it. Like we had this final push Kickstarter a couple of years ago, and we were like, oh, we're done.
Yeah.
But I think I could be wrong. I think I'm right though, is that we're actually, I think, on the cusp of breaking a new story with characters, and maybe even create new characters to where it could propel even further into the future. Well, we're talking about the future. So
I'm really excited. We've been talking for days about the different like plot threads and things that we want to develop, and the not just offshoot plots, but like main plots too that we wanted to pursue.
Yeah. So Tim has a comment here about validation, and this relates. Yeah.
It felt like validation was wrapping up with the con storyline.
Well, definitely Allie's story was wrapping up. And I think Tim mentioned earlier, so Allie's in love. Yep. Albert and Allie just got together, and, but rather than like show their story about being in love, which I think would be it's time to move on from that. I think we've had our say completely, pretty much for the moment, about those characters. It's time to go someplace else.
Yeah, I think, it's about time that they went off and did their own thing, and we shifted the attention towards some other characters. I think too, should I go ahead and spoil who the focus is going to shift?
No, go for it.
Mike and Steve, who are my favorite babies. They're my favorite babies because, and this is something that I've talked about with Chris, they're so, at first glance, they look like stereotypical frat boys. And I wanted to play with that. I wanted to play with the idea of like two guys who are perceived as frat boys, but they are actively working to become better people and working to actively be not just allies, but accomplices to people who maybe need to have more exposure. And especially since Mike and Steve, their thing is they love indie voices and they like to boost other indie voices. And so I wanted to see where their journey was going to go.
They're super supporters. I mean, we saw that with the whole Max anti-Santa thing. Anti-Santa. I want him anti-Santa. Such a ridiculous concept. I love it. But,
I will say, roller derby girls. That's Roxy. I think she's going to get her own comic. And my roommate was like, yes. So she's not out of the running. In fact, she's going to be rolling into her own story.
See, I'm loving this.
I like that.
I'm loving this because
yeah, there you go. I like that.
I actually have not had a chance to read Validation yet. So seeing phrases like the LGBTQ Underground Railroad out of context is very entertaining.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I love it. But yeah, there's just so many good ideas that have come from this live stream. Not just the comic stuff, but the comic story idea stuff, but just the ideas of an online convention, how it could be run, how to structure it, and all that stuff. Y'all, we need to start one.
Yeah, I think this is something we're going to need to talk about off camera and like actually see if we can figure out some stuff.
Yes.
I mean, I'd be down. Like, I'm not going to say I got the time, but I probably could make it work.
We can make time. If
yeah,
this
exactly.
Is something that we actively want to pursue, we can make time for it.
I think it could be interesting. I especially like the home shopping network idea.
Yeah.
Because the biggest problem I have with all the online cons is figuring out how to do sales through it. Because like I spent the entire weekend of CyberCon doing constant panels in relation to my field. And like I did Cospain live draw stuff. I think I did 2 of those panels, which included a guest. I did a D&D stream, a one-shot, which was awesome. I did a panel on mystery comics because I make mystery comics, and I did all this sales stuff. I don't think I had a single sale off the entire thing, and it just figuring out how to like put in that work and actually get paid for it would be great. And I think
well, I think hosts are going to be one element that will help a lot. Carlos was like, we'll message on Instagram because I think he's got a few ideas. As a regular person, it does feel phony when creators shill and browbeat fans, then don't spend their own money on this stuff. That there is something to be said about. There are some artists that I think maybe sell better online than they do in person at conventions because they're not good in-person salespeople.
There is one other thing I want to bring up in relation to that, because the costs that tablers incur, a lot of times people don't realize how substantial that is. Because not only, so the classic thing at a con is the basic goal is to make table, which means make the same amount in sales that the table cost you. Because we all have to pay a fee to do that. We're also paying hotel rooms, food, like pretty standard con stuff, travel often. We're lugging a ton of equipment that we had to pay for to get there. The stuff we're selling often took us hours to make, which is time is money also.
The card to get there. paying for gas for the car to get there, making sure that the car is well maintained.
When we're budgeting, we usually think using the IRS tax laws for gas, which means we're thinking 55 cents a mile.
Mm-hmm.
So think about that. Like if you have to travel 100 miles each way, which is not out of the question for a con, that's actually fairly low for a lot of cons.
Yep.
We're talking about an extra $100 right there. And the tablers are trying to make all that money back.
Mm-hmm.
Plus the money that you spent to print the books,
yeah,
to print the print, and then your time creating that. I mean,
and while we enjoy making art, it's also hugely time consuming and a lot of work, and it's stuff that we're not getting paid for. Like for the most part, we're kind of not breaking even.
Yeah.
What am I saying? Kind of. The majority of tablers are not breaking even. Most are losing money doing this.
Yeah.
And you keep doing it because A, you hope that eventually you'll be successful and then it'll lead to more money later. And B, you do enjoy doing it. The shilling is just something we kind of have to do.
But I think
a lot of us don't like it, but it's funny. Actually, the best salesmen I know hate selling. They're just good at it.
But I think what Tim is also saying here is then don't spend their own money on this stuff means that they're not giving back. So they shill and they browbeat the fans, but then they don't give back to other stuff. I could be wrong.
Oh, I understand. You're saying like they're not buying other people's comics and stuff like that.
Yeah. Which is something that I had to learn to balance myself out too. I think you get so excited selling your own books and stuff that you forget, hey, wait a second, I'm starting to sell some books and comics and all of that. I need to start giving back,
Yeah.
Talk about other things and let people know that you're not just a soulless vessel of consumerism. You're actually in love with what you do, and you're in love with the medium as a whole.
That is fair. And another thing I'll tell you, when I don't get a table at a local con, what I'll very often do is go by, look, and I use this partially as networking, but I also very often go up to people's tables and try to buy one thing off of them, because people are so happy when you buy it, and you get that after you've been a tabler, just that adrenaline rush when someone actually wants to buy your stuff. Even though I often don't have time to read this stuff, I'm grabbing it, I'm buying it, I'm interacting with people, I'm finding out what they're up to. Kashida Tim has another comment. How do they survive? A lot have day jobs. A lot have other things they do. Speaking personally, I'm one of the very lucky people to be in this situation. I managed, before I went into making comics professionally, to save up a lot of money. I managed to work and I lived with my parents for a long time, so I was spending a lot less money. I invested some of that money in stocks, and this was back when the stock market crashed in 2008, which was actually a really good time to buy stocks because the stock market recovered and everything went up. It allowed me to go to grad school. I've been using that to survive a lot of the time. And a lot of people get mad when they hear this, because it's like, I've had a huge nest egg that I've been able to work off of. And I bring it up mainly because I don't want to pretend I didn't have this.
This is something that I think more people need to be honest about, is the privileges that they do have. Because I know that the phrase "pull yourself up by your bootstraps" was originally coined as it actually came up as a joke, and then it eventually became a thing that was taken seriously as a serious phrase. But it was started as a joke, because you can't actually physically pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
Right.
But the idea of pull yourself up by your bootstraps, you're a self-made person, you do everything yourself and you didn't get any help from anybody, that's a myth. Because I'm very much in that same boat. I lived with my mom for many years. I saved up a big emergency fund. I had other kinds of day jobs. I didn't have too many, because I was in a really economically depressed area. So the only jobs available to me were part-time retail ones that paid minimum wage.
By the way, I currently do not have any other job, and it's kind of a problem. like one of the things a lot of creators are like, the dream is to not have a day job and just do this full time. And yeah, I get that. But something that you need to keep in mind is that not having a job, not having a day job for this stuff often means that like I'm paying my own like medical insurance, and it's like the premiums are crazy. It's really hard to get stuff because you have to go through the online marketplace, which, I'm all for socialized medicine, but this was not well set up, and it's been getting kind of screwed up even more and more. And like there are all these random benefits to having any kind of side gig, like a little bit more stability, a little bit more stuff. So if you're able to do both, honestly, I recommend it. Like,
yeah.
And also, the longer I go without having a side job, the harder it is for me to think about, can I even go back to that?
Yeah.
So there are definite benefits to picking up side gigs and doing all of that.
Yeah.
I agree.
There's a fire sale on my stuff. Sorry, I just saw that.
So you're saying there's a fire sale on your stuff?
I did a literal fire sale at one point. Actually, the con I mentioned that, no, it wasn't that one. It was a different one. I think it was a Vermont Comic-Con. But about an hour before close, on Sunday, the fire alarm went off, and they decided to actually evacuate the building. Which normally, fire alarm goes off at a con, nobody does anything because they're like, some asshole pulled the fire alarm.
Well, usually, yeah,
and they just like kind of go with that. Like I've been to multiple cons of the fire alarm's gone off, and then it goes back in a second, and they don't make everyone evacuate. They made us evacuate here, so I took my money and I took a stack of comics, and and as soon as we were out, everyone was out in the parking lot, I started walking around doing a fire sale discount, half off of my comics, until we got back inside. I got such crazy energy out of that, and I was tabling with two other people who the whole time were just like,
yep.
But going back to some of the other stuff Kashida Tim was saying, if people are guilting you for not buying stuff at tables, like, they should not be doing that. I want to make that clear. Because we all get it. And it's very stressful being back there selling. There's a statistic that like 1 in 10 people at a con might stop at your table, and 1 in 10 of those people might buy something.
Yeah.
And you feel it with every single person walking by your table and not stopping, or the people who stop and don't buy anything and leaving. Every single one of those feels like a rejection.
Yeah.
Like that gets stressful, that gets hard. But at the same time, no wasted interactions. Like you learn from every single one.
Yeah.
You have good experience with the people. Even if someone comes up to you, talks for a while and leaves, there's something positive there. As long as they're not being a barnacle and blocking the table. Like that is different.
Yeah.
That is an important difference. Like, it's kind of a two-way street there, because you get great interactions, you get feedback from fans, you potentially make a fan for down the road. Like if they can't buy something now, maybe they buy something later. But you also, on the other side, should recognize that the person's there to sell stuff. Like they're there working their job. It's the same thing like why you shouldn't hit on a server. Because they're kind of stuck there to be nice to you. You can have a cool experience, but if someone comes up to sell stuff, comes up to actually buy stuff, give them the floor. I actually had someone come up to me and apologize for being a table barnacle once. It was great because they weren't one. Like they'd been there the day before. It was their first con. They thought they were into cosplaying, so they stopped and were talking to me about it, and then they bought the strips and left. And the next day he came back and was like, I read your comic and I saw the one about the table barnacle. I'm so sorry if I was a table barnacle. And I said, dude, you bought something. That alone makes you not a table barnacle. Also, he just instinctively stood to the side while doing it. Like he wasn't standing right in front of the table. He was off sort of to the side of it talking to me. I'm like, you did everything right. Do not worry about it.
Yeah.
It just, there are a lot of people who don't pick up social cues that tend to go to cons, and some of them, it can get bad. One of my favorite things that ever happened at a con was like that, where I had a guy come up who was showing me some of his art, which also, that could be, a lot of people are fine with that. Just be cool. Like, if you ever want to show a table or art, we're often completely down for that. As long as you're cool about it, and as long as you can take feedback. And as long as they're cool about the feedback, that's the whole thing.
Yeah.
But this guy came up and showed me his stuff and talked about, being an artist and making stuff. I was like, cool. Do you have a table here? Like, are you also a tabler? And he goes, what? Oh, no, I'd never do that. I want to have a life.
I remember you made a comic about this guy.
I did make a comic about it. It's why I wasn't mad when it happened, because I'm like, that's a comic about to happen. Like, you just gave me material. But yeah, like, that's one of the reasons I do think cons are not going to end up completely online, because that kind of interaction, you just don't, we're not getting online yet. Like, maybe when VR gets really good, that might start to be a thing. Like, we might end up full on Ready Player One. But
though there is something to be said about online conventions being accessible for people who are either agoraphobic or have extreme anxiety.
Yeah, I get that too. But yeah, I one of the things I was thinking about the other day is what it was like before I was doing cons for a living. Like, when I was working a day job, living with my parents right after the economy crashed. And I'd go to a con once or twice a year, and that was my big social thing for the entire year.
Yeah.
And for a lot of people, that's the case. Like, it's a big opportunity to go somewhere where the stuff you're interested in doesn't make you weird.
That's true.
It's such a safe space for a lot of groups. And I think that's the big part of why I don't think that we're going to see in-person cons die off completely. Yeah. At least not until digital cons get insanely good.
Yeah. If anything, I think digital conventions are going to be a supplement, not a total replacement for in-person Comic Cons.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, Tim made another comment. Talis Kimberly was flown in from England to Marcon the next year after the SJCon. Even though I know I will never have a chance to see her again, I just couldn't go through that again. That's legit.
Yeah. If you have difficulties with an individual con, that can, like, I have some stories for professional reasons. I won't go into specific cons, but there are some cons that I've been to and I'm like, this is just too bad. I can't go back unless they make some serious changes. And what's interesting is a few have. Actually, one thing I do want to shout out, because this is, like, before all this happened, there are a lot of cons that have been resistant to positive change. I do have an example of them actually doing it. So OhioCon is now one of my favorite cons to go to. When I first went to it was in 2009, before I was tabling. The big thing that bothered me was I thought the artist alley was garbage. Not a knock at, I'm talking about organizations specifically, because they had a no fan art rule, which was kind of hurting them at the time. And the artist alley was just set up as kind of a couple booths before the dealer's room. So everyone was walking through it to go to the dealer's room. And it looked really bad to me. Like, nothing, it was badly put together. Nowadays, still no fan art, but they've set them up as part of the dealer's room, just like a separate section. They've, like, tripled the number of people. And I know a lot of people who say it's their favorite con to table at because they don't have to do their fan art. They can do their original work. Yeah. And it's gotten some big improvement there. Also, the harassment thing that I keep going back to. CSSN categorizes cons and their harassment policies on a 0 to 6 scale. 2017, I believe, OhioCon had a 0 out of 6. That is not uncommon. Like, that is actually very common for cons to have such bad harassment policies that 0 out of 6 is there. 2018, 6 out of 6. They are the first 6 out of 6 con I heard about.
Wow.
But it's because they took feedback. They actually started working with CSSN and other groups to try and make that happen. Yeah. And in 1 year, they managed to turn that around. And apparently their policies got even better the next year. Like, it's interesting.
Oddly enough, MagicCon in Columbus was the most capitalist con I have ever seen, but the most chill I have ever been to. Oh boy. Tim, I know that you tend to think about politics a lot. I want to know what angle you're talking about with capitalist here, because for me, conventions in general are pretty capitalistic. So what makes MagicCon different from the rest?
Oh, hey guys, I just got a text here. I got to go take care of something.
That's fine.
Okay.
We went over our time anyway.
No, it's okay. I've had a great time, and I always love it. I just noticed I just have to do this. But let's wrap up the capitalistic thing though, and then.
He clarified in terms of selling. So most capitalists in terms of selling. So like all of the people there were actively selling stuff. I mean,
well, I think I kind of get the point he's been making. I think hard selling can be turn off for a lot of people. I think one of the tricks I've learned from selling is that the one of the biggest things you can do is make it very clear that you're selling. Like that sounds a little weird, but the people who try to be sneaky about it come off as deceitful. But the people who are like, "Hey, this is what I got. You want one?"
Yeah,
that's actually a lot easier for people to deal with because you're not like messing with them. Like you're just being very straightforward. This is what I got. This is what I'm selling. If you're not buying, that's fine.
Yeah. But also, speaking as somebody who worked at Cedar Point at doing caricatures for 3 years and then switched over to selling at Comicons, the way that you sell at an amusement park is different from how you sell at a comic convention, because at a comic convention, you are dealing with a lot more people whom nerdiness is core to their identity. So you are going to be selling to them in different ways. Also, they're generally smart enough to catch on to when you're trying to sell them on something.
Yeah.
And they're generally more of an audience that doesn't want to be actively sold to. Whereas whenever you're doing something at an amusement park, you are actively encouraged to like be extra cheesy and hardball, because that is what people at an amusement park expect. People don't expect that at a Comic-Con.
By the way, I just want to throw out there that Tim has also mentioned that MagicCon is a magician's convention in Columbus, and I want to go. Holy crap!
You do like card magic tricks.
Do I have a deck with me? Like, no. Are
you closing out with a magic trick?
That would be great. I do not have a deck handy, unfortunately.
But next time we do one of these, you need to close with a magic trick.
That would be fun. I actually recently I've been watching a lot of the React channel and the Try Not To channel, which is mostly like try not to laugh and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But they did a magician one, and there are a couple tricks where I was like, I think I know how they did that, but yeah. Like I'd be really interested to see. There was no pressure at the Magic convention because there were nothing but pickpockets. Oh yeah, you don't have to buy anything. Hold on, that's a nice phone you've got.
Yeah. All right, real quick, let's go ahead and wrap this up. We've been at this for a little over 2 hours now, so let's go ahead and wrap this up with where can everybody find you? CB, where can people find you online?
Well, you threw my link up there, christianberanek.com, but also, definitely check out validationcomic.com, our comic. That's got links to all of our stuff there. So yeah, I mean, I'm on Amazon. I have an author page there with a bunch of different books. So
cool.
Although Amazon is the evil capitalistic empire, but
it's kind of a hydra.
It is a hydra with many heads.
Yes.
But yeah, just do that, and feel free to contact me wherever. I'm pretty open. So
yeah, Ben, where can people find you online?
Well, the main place is at my main website, bwhcomics.com. I'm also BWH Comics on basically all the social media, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram. I am on Facebook. Like, I kind of just post and ghost for most of these, but if you want to follow those, you'll find my comic stuff also on Reddit. If you want to find Cospain, which we talked about a lot, you can get there through this website or go directly to cospaincomic.com. That's COSPAIN. I also have a graphic novel series, The Letters of the Devil, which you can find at bwhcomics/LOTD. The second book will hopefully be coming out soon. I've been having some printer delays, which I may tell Kelsey about later off mic. But but yeah, that's where you can find the majority of my stuff. Cospain goes up every Tuesday at noon Eastern, and that's pretty much it. I also do a lot of live stream chats and live draws of Cospain.
Yeah. You can find me here on this YouTube channel. I also have a website, kelcidcrawford.com. You can find lots of the stuff that I do through there, my web comics and all that stuff, including The Legend of Jamie Roberts. If you want to find links to all of my things, I made a link tree, which you can find at linktree.ee/KelseyD. That has all my social media, my YouTube channel, also has The Legend of Jamie Roberts, and I believe Never Ending is also linked on there as well.
I also have a link tree. It's the same linktree.ee/BWH Comics.
I have a bio linky. You've been to that site? It's pretty rad.
I clicked on it. It looks a lot very similar. So same concept.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us, y'all. This has been a marvelous chat. Thank you very much, CB and Ben, for joining me here on this channel with this.
Thank you, Ben and Kelsey.
Yes.
And thank you for having me. Like this was a lot of fun.
Oh, this was so much fun. We should have another panel like this sometime.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. We'll nail those details down and we'll announce it on social media whenever we get something like this organized again. So Thank you so much for watching, everybody. Let's close out with our catchphrases. Sounds good. Rock on, guys, and never stop drawing.
I don't have a catchphrase. I need to work on that.
You do? You need to work on that. All right. Thanks for watching, everybody. You are awesome.
Bye.